Hello, Laban. How are you?
Mel B, always a pleasure, never a chore. I'm
Oh,
blessed. Thank you very much.
it's nice to see you.
It's incredible, isn't it? There's so much. Well, it's a good sign of your visibility online because I feel like I've met you. Uh, well, actually, we did meet.
Oh, that's
We did meet.
right.
That's why I feel it at the PSA event, the infamous PSA event, the national event in Adelaide 2020. But you were looking very
The,
different back then and had a
yeah,
lot of.
the weekend of COVID, literally the weekend of shutdown of COVID, last weekend of March. Yes, we've talked about the fact that we met, but we hadn't like connected. And yeah, I did look a bit different back then. I had a headscarf on, going through that whole journey that I went through. Blah.
The
Um,
answer K. Yeah.
so what should we talk about?
Well, you raised an interesting point talking about because you have a this affinity for empaths and working with empaths as the result of being an empath. And we haven't had an empath off, but there's parts of what I do that I would absolutely believe that I exhibit a lot of empathetic tendencies. And I think it's as powerful a weapon as it can be. It can also be a bit of a hindrance when it comes to making bold, outrageous, and courageous calls. And one of the things that you mentioned that really sort of struck me is that how many times when we are working with people from a business point of view, whether it be corporate or the private sector or commercial, residential, commercial, whatever the thing is, that we hold off because there's a fear of retribution. And an example might be, Mel, where when I'm doing one-on-one stuff with someone, usually private clients, I can sense something's not quite right about something. And in the past, I've been hesitant to bring it to the attention because I don't want to trigger someone. But I've learned and been vindicated now that those bold bursts of courageousness are paying massive dividends for the breakthroughs that these people are able to get, and in turn makes me a better coach. So is that a good place to start, maybe?
I love that. That's so juicy. Um, I want to pick up on what one of the first words, and I'm always listening for this. The difference between empathetic and being empathic. Because you said I'm very empathetic or something like that.
Oh, I did too.
And that's
And
okay
I meant
because
it.
when I say it too. But we're talking about being empathic, which is what
Yes.
you were touching on. And that is generally the more commonly understood terms, or a gut instinct or a gut vibe, or in this sense, I just wasn't sure whether what I was picking up on, gut instinct, intuitive, is the right thing, was the right angle to take a conversation in the context of coaching, because it might trigger them. So, do you want to, have you got an example or a story where you did and it was like awesome, or whether you didn't and it turned out that if you had, maybe a better outcome? Have you got any stories around?
I definitely have one for the former, and another one will come to me by the time we get to it, I think. And you're right, it is being empathic, and I have that too. And the because sympathy and empathy uh, create very different outcomes. Just as a side note, and people will wallow in their self pity when we are sympathetic too much. By the way,
They can. I would say they will. That's a bit.
yeah, they can for sure. There's no definitives in life when it comes to this kind of stuff. What I would say is there was a gentleman that I started working with at the start of 2022 who was one of my first high ticket clients. And he was a devout Mormon man out of Arizona, been in a marriage for 27 years. And he came up to me at an event. He didn't even know I was a coach at the time. And he said, "You must coach me." And I was like, wow.
We all want those encounters.
Right. Like it was, and we were so broke, Mel. We arrived in America with $1,000 and rent was due, which was 2,200 in about 8 days. So he ended up, I think he spent 15 grand on 3 months US. It was a great first client. And I said, okay, let's have a conversation at the house tomorrow after the event. We'll see what I can help. And it turns out, side note, that because I was wearing a pink linen jacket, he saw that, and he was a 6'3" white guy who was adopted by Hispanic parents. So he suffered, 2 lots of abandonment when that family broke up. But he saw the pink jacket and he said, that's the kind of level of masculinity I want to embrace. So that was great feedback for me. And I share that with other people because it's like, isn't it funny just how you dress can have an impact on people? And I've been wearing pinks for ages. So it's like, I love it. It's not even that bold a decision anymore. But as the time went on, Mel, his wife was leaving the Mormon faith at the time to have an affair. And I knew that because she had basically been telling him that. And
is it an affair if you disclose it? Anyway, side note.
I don't know. We need to look up the definition of affair. And based on the start of this, I need to check some of my English language, but I'm certain on this part. And I was sitting there observing this going, there's only one way out of this that I can see. And I said to this guy, after we had spent some time, built some rapport together, I said, let's call him Dave. Dave, you need to leave your wife. And what I want to make very clear is that the only way out of this situation, because he was very in his feminine and she had gone very in her masculine. And of course, we all know that drives healthy relationships into the ground. And, this was mainly as much his fault as it was hers because he'd allowed this stuff to happen. And I think that question, maybe I said, I think, how would you feel about leaving her? Maybe it was a question, gave him enough of a jolt that he realized that he actually didn't want that. And it was far easier for him to start laying down some boundaries about what he would be happy and tolerate compared to what he was doing. And he was a very passive guy and I know I've got lots of Mormon friends who are incredible people. There is a lot of restriction around the religion, and talking about your feelings isn't high on the list of priorities. Mm-hmm. And I'm so pleased to report they are more in love than ever. They've both still got a connection to the church, but they've kind of gone a bit more mainstream, I suppose, living around the world. And he got a tattoo and had his first beer, and they've been doing plant medicine and stuff. But they're happy. They are more in love than they've ever been in 27, 28 years. And that really came from a place of oh man, I could feel his anguish. I could feel the direction that situation was going. And if I had just pussyfooted around the subject and, it'll be okay. And not that I would ever do that as a coach, by the way, but but I was fearful of how he would respond if he took it really badly, and not in the way that it was intended, which was from an absolute place of love and care. Because he had paid me to help him with reclaiming his masculinity. That was one of the main directives. And so I don't know if that really fits in super duper well with an example, but that's my example. So off the back of that, Mel, I was like, stuff it. I'm just going to lean into that as much as I can and not be fearful of the rejection or upsetting or antagonizing. Because if it is done with the pure intent with no agenda, what else do you want from me kind of thing? I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I guess it depends on who's listening. That could be a definition of a great coaching conversation that blurs the lines of coaching 101. I always found it interesting, like the difference in the early days. I used to be very defined around, I'm a coach, I'm not a mentor, versus a consultant. And I was really like, ugh. And then I'm like, I'm whatever the client needs to be, needs me to be. And sometimes that is a little bit more directive in the questioning that leads for them to explore on a different level. versus what do you want, kind of coaching direct down the middle. So that's my first response, is great coaching isn't always, I think, staying safe, because if you have an example or an answer or a view that they can reflect on and find what works for them, then that serves. That's what they're paying you for, to help them find some sort of breakthrough or different view or perspective, whatever. From an empath point of view, I would like to delve deeper and say, can you remember when you said you feel differently? Now, there's a difference between being in a space with someone and resonating with what they might be going through. In this case, it was anguish, versus receiving through one of our receptors an empathic piece of wisdom that then we check and test with the person in front of us and go, I'm getting the sense, feeling, vision, thought of this, and I think this could be useful for a conversation. Can you recall what you were thinking that you were fearful of how it would land, that because it was more intuitive suggestion versus a coaching question?
I suppose, yeah, very good, interesting perspective and question. There was two perspectives. There was the rational part of me that was like, man, I can't believe it. This is even going to come out of my mouth. And what came out of my mouth was the guidance. And I've obviously left. There was probably about 6 sessions that went on that were 2 hours each in between. So I'm really paraphrasing a lot of the stuff.
Of course.
So it was based on a number of items of information that I'd learned. And also, I'm a child of divorce, a very, very destructive divorce that was hate fueled, still is at times, with some of the resentment, 40 years down the line from parents, mum and dad. And the trajectory that I could see, there was so many similarities with what I had witnessed and observed, not just with my mum and dad, but with lots of other failing relationships. And I have an incredible relationship with my wife, Anna. So I had that to rely upon for vindication. But that was the download. That was the download. You give him that information. And
I pause you there. How did you receive it? Because we have at least 9 receptors, and most people understand being empathic as just a feeling. Do you know, can you tap into what your receptor is? And it might not just be feeling. Usually it's not.
So it's interesting, the timing of this. I've just been watching about a 13, 14 part Joe Dispenza series. Mm-hmm. And for anyone that doesn't know who Joe Dispenza, an incredible mind and researcher around how the brain works, and healed his own body through using thought. And it wasn't any of the traditional receptors. This was one that came through the pineal gland. Do you know what I mean? Like, and you might be listening to this laughing, thinking about the woo-ness of it, but like there's a huge amount of hard data that like how we receive messages, other worldly, other dimensional messages, is through these crystalline structures that exist in the pineal gland that are activated more and more when you become, specifically when cerebrospinal fluid gets forced up through the spinal cord and puts pressure on these crystals, and it activates them, and a magnetic field comes around. I can't believe I'm even saying this out loud, but it's like, and the brain and heart power amounts that are outputted by people under these brain scans. The highest one that I saw was to the magnitude of 250 outside of the range. And when he showed it on the graph, it was incredible. So without knowing it at the time, Mel, having learned more about it, that makes a lot more sense to me, that came through that, rather than a conditioning or a trigger response or a trauma response. And people could argue, it was based on previous experiences or what, and that might be very well the case, but I've been able to do it time and time and time and time again. And very rarely have I made a mistake. The only times that I have made mistakes when I've gone against that intuition. So I don't know. What do you reckon?
Oh, I concur. When I'm in my client sessions, I So I help people in my language anyway understand how it comes from our pineal gland and into our body, and then how it's experienced in the body. So for me, I get thoughts, which is for me the label of clear intelligence. And it's usually something that is abstract, doesn't quite make sense, and it doesn't fit with where the conversation or the scenario currently is at. I'll be this abstract thought. And if I air it, I just got the sense of a cinema. And that will trigger something in them. They're going, you know what? That makes sense to me because I was bullied in a cinema or something traumatic happened at the cinema. And it's only because I've learned to trust these moments of empathic resonance within myself, not resonance with another, within that's a thought that comes through one of my sensory receptors. And trusting it takes a bit of courage. I love what you said at the start is, oh no. And people's like, oh, it's a bit like being a psychic. Well, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit. I don't necessarily resonate with the word for myself, but there's a piece of knowledge of something that's coming through that is for us that connects with the other person. So that empathic resonance for ourselves is we have to trust that. And if we can amplify that, geez, life gets easier because it's easier to trust our decisions, our responses to situations, circumstances, opportunities. Sometimes it's to say no to opportunities.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear an example of one of your best empath moments.
My favorite
And
story, sorry.
no, I was just going to say, and before you share it, I recently spoke to a guy who was on Sean Ryan's show, who's an ex-Navy SEAL, and he interviewed a guy who was a CIA remote viewer for 30, 40 years. So what that means, he could get into deep states of meditation and go to different parts of the world, if you believe what he's saying. And like the way he spoke about it, he's either the best actor on the planet or he actually was doing this. And interestingly, the only way that you could achieve remote viewing is by completely destroying the ego. And they called that like psychic viewing, but it's called remote viewing, but it's a real thing. It's like, and they were able to rescue hostages and children and find captured soldiers, and like they've got thousands of test cases. So it's like someone's telling a big lie. My point is with that, before you tell your amazing story, like if you open your mind up to other possibilities based outside of what we've learned at primary school, a whole new world opens up. And I think that's helped me become a better everything as a result. But please tell your story.
I love that. I'm going to listen to that because many people want those tangible, real examples of the intangible. CIA uses it. I know some people use it when there's in the police force, when there's like a missing child or there's something like that where, you know, they've exhausted all avenues and then they bring some and they find.
Same guy, same thing, same outcomes.
Yeah, same skill set. Anywho, so my simple explanation, my story that I like to share is when I discovered I was an empath and then discovered what being an empath was. That's about 6 years ago now, and I'd been a coach for 2 years prior to that. And I was networking, love meeting people, even though I'm an ambivert or an ambivert, whichever you are in the world. So I love being around people equally as much as I love silence. And this occasion, it was a lunchtime 2 or 3 course lunch. And in the middle between the entree and the main course, we had a little bit of a mingle time. I was good and I was fine. And then I approached an associate And as we were speaking, I just started to feel really, really nauseous, to the point where my love language is quality time. So I love being present. And I found that my mind was so distracted, like, I think I'm going to throw up. And I had to, like, I have to stop, you have to go to the bathroom. And she's like, why, what's wrong? And I was like, I think something's wrong with my entree. I think I'm going to throw up. And she laughed at me. And I'm like, excuse me? And she said, no, that's my anxiety. I'm waiting for the bank approval for a really big project that I've pitched for, and I want this bank loan. And they said they would call me by whatever time it was, and they haven't called yet. And I'm just crapping myself waiting for this. And as she said, that's not your energy, it's mine, the nausea just left my body. What? I have no idea what just happened. And she went, oh, you'll be an empath. If you felt all of that, you're an empath. And I was like, so I was able to continue normal. Like, it just left, and continued my meal and had a glass of wine, and everything was fine, which you wouldn't be able to do if you've been receiving food poisoning. So I then researched down in the rabbit hole of what being an empath was, and discovered there's more than one way. I do feel the energy around me. And what I worked out within a matter of months is I thought I had lived with mild anxiety, like a high level of nervous energy whenever I was networking, all these nerves. Turns out it was never me. I was never nervous. I was feeling other people's nerves. And after a couple of months, once I worked it out and I was able to meditate, and I'm like, whoop, protection, barriers up. I get nervous sometimes as a speaker when I'm going on stage. That's normal. I'm okay with that. But
Healthy.
now I'm
Healthy.
healthy. It means I care. But now I can tell when you go around a networking event and you introduce yourself or you do something, and oh my, I have to protect for that, because everybody around me starts getting really nervous. Oh, I'm going to be handed the microphone, I don't want to speak. And that was my moment of, for me, it was really tangible, because I may have possibly thrown up. That's how bad it was. And if she hadn't told my subconscious, it would have manifested itself in the physical explosion.
Question for you. Question for you, Mel. What purpose do you think? Because what you're talking about far outweighs any resonance that I feel. You're super sensitive from compared to who I've spoken to, right? And I'm not saying that as a bad. It's a good thing. What purpose do you think being an empath serves?
Oh, so much. I think it's our internal compass. It enables me to check with myself what direction to go. If I have a conversation and I get a lot of people wanting to connect with me to have these kinds of conversations or whatever, they want something from me, I just ask myself, because I've learned how to do that, is this a skill? Just check in with myself. Is this a good opportunity for both of us? I never make it just about me. Is this a good opportunity for both of us? And if my initial, without any logic, my first instinct thought is a no, I pass up the opportunity, because I don't know what the future holds. But if I'm getting a no, then it might not serve them. I do this when we have a client, as you said, you have a conversation. Are we going to be a good fit? And if I get a no, I'm not the best solution for them. I don't take the money.
And people might be interested or wondering, because I've wondered this, but I believe I've got an answer, is how, like, if these things are real, Mel, like, why does it work virtually? Well, when you look at the quantum field where no time exists, it like they've been able to prove that you can, with quantum entanglement, like have a one thing over here and simultaneously being over at the same time. They've been able to test. I can't remember what the study was, but it's basically like, an example might be you look at your phone and 10 seconds later, Mel rings because you're thinking about it and you haven't spoken for a year. Like, how often does this happen to you?
Oh, for me, almost daily.
Has it happened more now that you are learning more and more and honing that skill?
Sure, for sure.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And I really want the message to be like riding a bike, like learning how to surf, like any skill. You may feel like a complete failure in the early starts and full of doubt. I'm never going to master this. It is a skill. We are born. Every infant is born with a multitude of skills. Babies know how to get what they want. We are master manipulators, but we are also really good at resonating with, in particular, our mother. So if our mother's on edge, baby will probably be upset, anxious, not settled. That's resonance.
I was babysitting a 10, 8, and 5-year-old, Lily, Jimmy, and Jonty, my brother's
Sounds like
kids.
a hard time for me. Anyway.
Well, we don't have kids yet, but we're kind of just frying pan and fire. We're working on it furiously. So we're like, hey, what better apprenticeship than to take on a 10, 8, and a 5-year-old? And they are beautiful kids. And Lily, the 10-year-old, she's a savant. Photographic memory. She's just, my wife's Russian, as you know, and she's learned to speak 1 to 100 in Russian, and like from the week that we babysat to the next week. And I'm still struggling with like hello and goodbye.
Yeah.
And so, but I love empowering these kids with like cooking, for example. Like Lily wanted to cut something, and so I asked her to wipe down the knife, and I deliberately gave her a big knife. And it's no reflection on her mum. Her mum's incredible, but they've got 4 under 10. So having, kids in the kitchen has just been, it's not convenient. And the house that they lived in was tiny before they moved. And she nicked herself with probably about a 1 centimeter cut on her middle finger.
You're the worst babysitter ever.
I know, right? But she burst into tears. And I remember when I was young, about that age, there was 1 or 2 responses. It was like the hyper aggressive one or the hyper mollycoddle one. And I was like, I ain't going to do that. So I was just like, what did you do? She's like, I got myself. And then I didn't react. I just was like, it's okay. I cut myself all the time when I was chefing, and I got plenty of band-aids. We'll sort it out. And honestly, Mel, I reckon within about 60 seconds, she was laughing and smiling again. I could have gone, oh my God, I'm so sorry, like blah, 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 and then allowed her to kind of wallow in that self-pity. But it's just as an example, as a demonstration of how important it is for us as leaders and mentors in a work environment we're talking about, not to overreact either way, not to be too dismissive, not to be over abrasive. What do you think about that? Does that play into you?
It's a huge conversation. I mean, leadership I believe it's through example. And I know I've had leaders, bosses, supervisors who haven't known how to deal with stuff. That stuff. You don't bring that stuff into the office. You want us to be robots. You want us to be non-emotive because they can't handle it themselves, or they don't know how to respond to it. And without this becoming, because neither of us are parents, so without this becoming a parenting conversation.
I don't know, Mel. Not like no deaths from babysitting 7 or 8 times. I think that qualifies as a parent. No major injuries or deaths.
You are certified as a babysitter. I think being able to respond to, taking that example, being able to respond to any scenario and understand what is my emotional response and how am I projecting that? How is that being received on the other end? what is my responsibility to self-manage my response that is or is not in proportion or in reaction to their response. And as an empath, knowing that often it's not actually me, and therefore I can sense, pick up, hear, know, or feel what might be the cause of their response is an absolute gift. To get the sense of their feeling be valued, even though that was not at all what the scenario was about. Oh, I just know. Now, some of this is learned, some of this is cognitive, some is experienced from our own life scenarios. But if you embrace that your intuition system sometimes has more clues and extra information, that definitely makes us better role models and leaders and coaches and speakers and all the things where we are showing up in society and have a responsibility for the impact that we're making and helping the other people with their impact.
Amen to that. And I think it's not their fault. It is their responsibility. But like if you grew up, like a lot of us did, without, I don't know how to be a man. Like I just, I spoke to my father today for the first time in 2 years on the phone. We've had messages back and forth. And there was some challenges around, we kind of have grown apart over the last 8 years, which is incidentally when I started my transformation journey. It's 8 years sober next month, and of drugs and gambling and turned my life around. And I the conversation, just being totally honest with you, was around what kind of relationship do you want to have with me, if any?
Initiated by you asking him that?
Me asking him. He's 73, by the way, lives down in Geelong, and him and I were like this, very close for a long time. And then it was weird. It kind of drifted apart. And he told me he was scared of me. And he wasn't able to quite articulate what exactly that looked like. So I'm still waiting to hear what that, I kind of have an idea. Because if you caught me at my lowest in a fit of rage, I would say and have said very hurtful things. In fact, I disowned him at one point back in 2020. And to heal from that, I invited on Dr. Fred Luskin on the podcast, who founded the Stanford Forgiveness Project, which was responsible for reuniting Auschwitz camp survivors with the camp commander and IRA bomb blast victims, the mothers of the dead children, to forgive the soldiers that set the bombs. So I was like, if they can forgive for that, then maybe I can deal with this. So we were able to seal things, redo things, but that was a really tough conversation to have with someone who may not be at a level emotionally to even know. But it was important for me because I'm suffering, because I get sad and I get angry. Like, why can't I just have a normal relationship with my father? You know what I mean? And I know a lot of people listening to this will be resonating with this hard. But the reason I did it, Mel, was because I was sick of creating these scenarios in my brain. Byron Katie talks about, truer than true. Is it truer than true? And I was like, why am I wasting time on things that may not even exist? It's just, hey, look, do you want to, what kind of relationship, if any, do you want to, because if you don't want any relationship with me, then let me know and I'll make the adjustments. Ideally, he goes, son, I'm sorry, let's reunite. But I can't put that expectation on him because he's not there, and I probably never will be. And I think when it comes to what you do, if you're able to have or ask a question that elicits someone to become aware of something like what I'm talking about here, it provides a tremendous amount of relief. I feel fantastic. It was a 90-minute phone chat, first time in 2 years, maybe longer. And I haven't seen him in 3.5 years. And I feel Oh my God, there's such a huge sense of relief. So I just wanted to share that. It was just front of mind. So
I think that's a nice scenario around we I'm trying to find the right words, so I'm intuitively trying to tap in. We're all children running around in adult bodies. I don't know about anybody else, but I thought when I was going to be 45 that I'd have all my shit together. That like then you just live life, like you reach adulthood and then you just live that out for the rest of your days. Holy crap, was I wrong? I now understand people in their 70s still have insecurities about themselves. And it still blows my mind that our existence is a snapshot of time, which is a construct, but we'll talk about it another way. And it's such a short blip, 100 years maybe if we're lucky. But the top and tail of that, we're nappies. We're not of sound mind generally. You know, the first 10 years and the last 10 years, probably not at our best, sharpest, shall we say. But that doesn't mean we're not still sponges. It doesn't mean we're not still receiving and we're not still existing. And that still plays into how we resonate, whether we can communicate it effectively in what we generally articulate verbally or visually. So where am I going with that? We're all learning. We're all kids. The amount of clients I have in their 40s and 50s are like, I wish I learned this when I was in my 20s. Right. I wish I understood that I'm a highly sensitive person and that I can control that to a certain degree. Wish I freaking knew that in my 20s. That would have been so helpful. Probably would have avoided as well some of the relationships I had with men. Might have avoided a couple of unhealthy ones if I'd known to trust my instinct. And yes, there are red flags and all the rest of it. But then there's this narcissistic stuff that is covert, that is not obvious. But there's part of us that just knows something's wrong with this connection, with this person. No. But we don't pay attention to red flags. We ignore it. Or we think we can change them because we have such a beautiful heart and soul that we want to help change the world. And to do that, we support others without realizing it's actually detrimental to ourselves.
And on to add to that, we receive misguided advice from people who have paid no attention to it at all, saying, just ignore that intuition and just go with your reason and your logic. Like,
society.
Well, one of the many frustrations in the relationship with my father, like when I was 16, I was academically at the like just school, and I did not gel, and I thought for a long time it's because I was an idiot, and I did behave like an idiot at school sometimes. But when I was 16, I filled out all the paperwork to go to radio school through TAFE, like community college for anyone in our American buddies, and Dad wouldn't sign it. And he was a radio announcer, a really good one too. And he goes, oh, there's no money in radio, son. There's no money. And had he asked one question, why do you want to get into radio? I would have maybe given enough reason to go, oh, okay, maybe it's not about the money. It doesn't matter when you're 16. I just wanted to, and then fast forward till 2020 when I create my own radio station in the form of a podcast and have now had conversations with some of the most incredible people on the planet. It's funny how it's all gone 360. And he was operating from his limited thinking. And I suppose the point of this is I want for myself, in terms of a role model in my family when we do have children, is to be able to foster more questions to allow the kid, and I do this with coaching as well, is that the thing that they really want? And if it is, how can I help you get there? Or if it's just because they watch something on TV and they go, I want to be an actor, and their heart's not really in it, well, then you can just ask a few more questions and then, oh, actually, maybe I do want to do something else. Maybe I do want to be a speaker or whatever. I don't know. So that was kind of the point of that. And it was like, people are operating from their own levels of belief. And I suppose our responsibility as the next generation is to continue to empower ourselves with knowledge. Because if you and I were in a lift and it jammed shut and the power was out and we got notification that we were stuck in there for 3 days and there was 3 other people in there that did not know about how the body works and dry fasting, they would probably go into shock and maybe even die, even though, because of the knowledge I've acquired, what I've learned, I could say, don't worry, your body fat's going to hydrate you when you switch into a ketogenic mode. And you can actually go like this for at least probably 2 weeks with no water. And like that would completely shift that energy and that dynamic. So, yeah.
I don't know where to go from that.
Maybe that's a good place to wrap it up.
In the lift.
Well, we've given people a lot, I think. I've given myself a lot.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot through living life with curiosity. There's a lot through checking assumptions, and that's not an easy thing to catch because they're so default, they're so ingrained, that it's not easy in the moment to go, why am I doing that? Why does this have to be this way? Or where are they coming from? Or, curious about our defaults. And we are in a society where, if we look back at the generational upbringing that our parents had, so our grandparents' existence was of war, world wars. And that mentality, if you like, that existence is what our parents grew up with. So I see it as my job to have compassion for that's what they know. Entrepreneurialism, not doing the industrial way of employeeship is actually mind-blowing because they only understand a certain way that society has operated and recovered to a certain degree. And that's cool. Great. It's served. And hopefully we never have to experience anything like that again. And we probably won't. It'll be different. And if we can live with that compassion and curiosity of going, well, where are they coming from? What's the lens? And have love for that's all they know. Wow. That would have been a hard existence. And then having curiosity of like, well, what is possible? We have more millionaires per capita than ever before. There's a reason for that.
Inflation.
And if we connect with ways that we can, there's a movie, the TV Netflix show, and I can't remember what it's called, but it was about the Callings Manifest, was it? With the planes? Where the plane disappeared. Anyway.
Like MH80 or whatever, the Malaysia.
Yes, that one. Anyway, so the plane disappeared in this Netflix show, and it was all about callings following callings. And I was watching going, that's your intuition. That's gut instinct. That's your compass guiding you. And yes, of course, it was dramatized and, very extreme, freaking disaster after disaster. But anyway, we can follow those and they can serve us and we can have a much better existence when we pay attention to ourselves.
Would you like, I'll quickly find the name of that interview because people might be curious because it was
Ryan, the CIA psychic remote reviewer.
I'll find it in 2 seconds. The guy's name, John McMoneagle, and McMoneagle.
Say that.
Joe.
Oh.
Mick, Moneagel. I think it's Moneagle, maybe, but it looks
Can you
like
say that slower, please?
Yeah.
M-C-M. Yeah.
Moneagle. And it's CIA's Project Stargate. But I called the guy. I wanted to invite him on the show.
Yeah.
Because I watched it and I was like, holy God, that's incredible. And it's funny you talk about that Malaysian Airlines thing. There was a guy, Dr. Stephen Greer, who's a ufologist who he's been on Joe Rogan a few times.
Stephen
And
Krieger.
he's got all the evidence to suggest that for more than 100 years, both alien and man-made, like reverse engineered alien crafts that do not exert G-force. They've got some kind of like magnetic field around them already exist, and basically infinite power already exists. And the reason I think that some of these planes go down is there's key figures, key patent holders on the plane, people that had discovered a cure for HIV or something on that first one. There was 2 that went down. These aren't my thoughts. This is just paraphrasing what I saw from this.
Down a whole different path.
Yeah. So, but like the reason I bring that up is just, I'm just exposing myself to different ideas, like stuff that I thought years ago. That's absolutely insane. That's absolutely insane. Like the dry fasting is like, you're going to die. And then I've done it. I've done it for 2 days. My wife's done it for 4 days, and no one's dead. And I think exposing yourself to those kind of ideas gives you lots more weaponry in your arsenal, because if I hadn't watched that Joe Dispenza thing, I wouldn't have been able to articulate that whole, the calcium shards in the pineal gland effectively.
Yeah.
And we want to become better teachers, all of us, to help articulate some of the things that are unarticulatable, which I think I just made that up.
For the moment. And I think that's the thing, science is about discovering and validating new ideas, concepts, possibilities. The problem with science is it's limited to what it applies the logic of the scientific research against. And so if they're applying one set of principles that are just being, okay, they're just given, that is what it is, then the science is always going to be falling short of what else we can accomplish. Our brains, so just to finish on this note, people like, meditation, I can't shut the mind down, like blah, 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 it's really noisy, it's really hard. And it's like, just practice. And they're like, so what's the point of it? I say, do you get stressed? Do you get overwhelmed? Yeah, sometimes. All right. This is what you could accomplish in a matter of minutes. I was waiting for, full circle conversation, I was waiting for my portacath to be installed, which is the little device that goes in your chest that's plumbed into your veins. You can still see the marks there that go in for your chemo treatments. And I'm like super happy, blah, 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 bald on the freaking cold slab, waiting for this operation to have this put in. And it's an awake.
There's nothing wrong with being bald, folks.
No, there is not. In fact, I look gorgeous when I'm bald. And you do too. And there was a problem with the machine that would scan and guide them where to put the tubes. Obviously, they're plumbing this thing into your heart, so they weren't just going to dilly-dally. So they said, oh, we just need to fix them and we need to get a tech in and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, no problem. Can I get an extra blanket, please? And it was supposed to be like a 20 to 30-minute thing, and I was there for 90 minutes. So while the nurse is like, we don't want to like take you out and bring you back again because we've cleansed and we've done, like, you kind of prepped. I literally had the big heavy blue matte thing, the LED, whatever. And to pass the time, I did some meditation. I did my process that I guide my clients through, which takes them into theta state, that stage when you're falling asleep and you're aware that you're dreaming whilst you're falling asleep. It's just like that little micro moment. And the nurse came up and she shook me awake at one point. She went, what are you doing? Well, thanks for the jolts. I said, I'm just meditating. She went, you need to stop that. I'm like, what? Like, firstly, that was very rude just to awaken me. And she says, your heart rate has dropped. And if you keep it at that rate, we won't be able to do this on you at all, let alone the machine's not working. I'm like, sorry? She says, your heart rate and your pulse has dropped to dangerous levels. Stop what you're doing.
Mm.
And I'm meditating. This is what I meant to. She went, oh. She said, well, but can you still stop doing that because you're freaking us all out? And I was like, can I get a screenshot of the heart rate dropped? And of course, there's no phones in there. She's like, no, you can't. We can't do that. Not a screenshot, a photo. And she says, no, there's no devices in here. So that's my nearest evidence I was able to get that we can lower our heart rate to the point where the doctors and nurses are concerned about you.
What was the rate? What did it go down to?
I can't remember. It was like 30 or something, really, really low.
So, to give you an idea, folks, Lance Armstrong, when he was doing steroids, his resting heart rate got down to 33, by the way, and he was regarded as the fittest guy on the planet at the time with the help of steroids. The timing of you bringing this up is so interesting because have you done much down of Jose Silva's Silver Mind method meditations at all?
I think I've done a couple, or I'm thinking of the author of a book that's also called Silver. Maybe it's a different person. I'm not sure.
His daughter is Laura. I also spoke to her yesterday. So for 3 days and 3 nights, I've been doing these, the morning one and the evening one. I have had the most incredible lucid dreams. And I wear a Garmin Phoenix. It's like a high-end athletic watch, tracks resting heart rate variability. Heart rate variability, resting heart rate, blood, breathing, everything. And I can see when I start the meditation, my heart rate went from like 80 down to like 43. And my resting heart rate when I'm fasting probably gets as low as like 38.
Yeah.
And I'm relatively fit. So these numbers are incredibly low and they will freak people out. But the reason, and just to add to what you're saying, Mel, the reason that I've been told to meditate in the past, the coaches never explained to me more of the why, and they didn't ask enough questions to see whether I got it. So I would do it, stop and start. I've been in fight or flight for the last 5.5 years. Business pressure, miscarriages, financial pressure with work, having to flee the country, a litany of reasons. And I'm wondering why I've stacked on 20 pounds when I was able to get down to 8% body fat effortlessly. And I realized I've known this the whole time. I just didn't pay attention to it as my cortisol levels have been through the roof. I will not shift an ounce of weight unless I get that down. So for me, it's to take away the cortisol, which makes me stay in creation mode way better, and it will expedite my journey. It will compress time. So do it from a selfish point of view that you can get stuff done.
That's what I'm doing at you. It's like, just do it to lose weight.
Yeah. And so stand by for the next conversation we have, because I have been meditating off and on, but I haven't stuck to it. Now I've got a very powerful why, because when I watched Joe Dispenza's documentary and I was seeing how the brain works, I was just like the penny dropped. It was like when I gave up alcohol. It was just like, I get it. And that's been 8 years. So effortlessly. So I second and third that is what I'm saying.
What a beautiful note to finish on. I think we should stop there.
Mel, where do people get a hold of you?
Oh, I'm on all the socials. LinkedIn is the one that I'm working on at the moment too.
What do they search? How do they find you?
Oh, Mel Balment. I go Mel B because Balment is very confusing with Melanie. So we just go Mel B. Mel
And
B.
it's two L's with
Mel. That's
Mel,
my first name. Yeah. What about you? You have it's taken me a while to learn. It's Laban with 2 A's. Laban.
not after each other, but Laban. Laban Ditchburn. There's only one on the planet.
Oh, and there's only one Mel Balment on the planet as well.
there is two, yeah.
Well, yeah, there's only one of us.
Well, Mel, thank you very much for your time today. It's been amazing.
And where are you? I want to know your podcast. Go on, share it, please.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. Become Your Own Superhero podcast. Available on all the audio platforms. We have a version on YouTube and an even more distinct one on Rumble.
Ah, beautiful. All right, let's chat again soon. That was fun.
Appreciate you, Mel.
Bye for now.